Jar tuners, start your engines. Today we're going to be racing into the fast-paced world of one of our childhood favorites, Cars. And not just the first movie, we'll be covering all three of them, and even the miniseries. To start off though, let's meet some of our lovable characters. Of course, there's Lightning McQueen, the red-hot, hot-headed race car with a superiority complex who's beloved by many. Next, we have Mater the truck, with rust on his bumper and probably his brain.
I like you already. My name's Mater.
The talk of the town is Doc Hudson, the legendary dirt track racer who's currently retired and spends most of his time trying to forget his glory days. Next, we have Sally, the 911 Porsche that McQueen instantly becomes infatuated with when he first lays eyes on her.
Listen, I'm gonna cut to the chase. Me, you, dinner.
What the? Ow! Ooh, please! Oh.
There are some not so great characters that we'll eventually delve into as well. But to start off, we've got Chick Hicks, McQueen's first rival, and an all-around egomaniac.
Bring out the piston cup. Ka-chicka, ka-chicka. Yeah! Now that's what I'm talking about.
With introductions out of the way, put on your seatbelt and air up those tires as we dive into the entire story of Cars. Our first movie begins with us meeting Lightning McQueen for the first time, an arrogant, know-it-all, winning, obsessed rookie. His underdog story starts off with him competing in the Dynaco 400 for the coveted Piston Cup, the highest achievement for all racers. McQueen is currently in a season tie with everyone's least favorite Chick Hicks and the veteran race car Strip the King Weathers, one of McQueen's heroes. McQueen, of course, wants to win at all costs, even if that means not getting his tires changed properly during his pit stop. This recklessness causes his crew to become extremely upset with him, and of course leads to his tires flying off toward the end of the race.
You fool!
In an absolute nail-biter of an ending, McQueen ties with both Chick Hicks and the King. After the race, McQueen's crew ends up quitting on him, but he doesn't care much due to him not really realizing the gravity of the situation. McQueen and his buddy Max set off to travel to their next destination all the way in California. During the trip, we overhear a conversation with McQueen and his manager, and it becomes clear that he has absolutely no friends whatsoever. When asked how many friends he wants to bring to his races, McQueen doesn't give much of an answer.
Right, baby?
Right, friends. Yes, there's,
Bruh.
Instead wanting to go to dinner with his manager, who is too busy and assumes McQueen has someone else to hang out with, which is it's just simply not true. Shortly after this conversation, Mac and McQueen fall asleep on the road, causing McQueen to fall out of the back of the truck. McQueen races off to catch up with an oblivious Mac. However, due to his speeding, he gets pulled over for the first time in his life. Not knowing what that actually means, he decides to slow down in order to ask for help. But Sheriff, the cop's name, isn't used to going that fast, and he begins to backfire, causing McQueen to think that he's being shot at.
He's shooting at me! Why is he shooting at me?
He races even faster and eventually makes his way into Radiator Springs, accidentally causing major road damage, tearing up basically their entire main road. After his chaotic night, McQueen wakes up in the old tire ward, with a boot wrapped around his front tire to prevent him from being able to escape. He's greeted by Mater, who instantly wants to become friends.
I like you already. My name's Mater.
Meanwhile, back in California, Mac arrives for the big race without McQueen. McQueen is taken to a town hall meeting where at first, Doc decides, upon seeing that he's a rookie racer, to let him go with no repercussions because he's disgusted by him and wants him out of his sight.
Throw him out of here, Sheriff. I want him out of my courtroom. I want him out of our town.
Sally enters and refuses Doc's wishes, riling the town up in order to get McQueen to pay his dues and fix their road. Though annoyed, Doc accepts this overruling of the town and allows McQueen the opportunity to fix the town that he's broken.
Seems like my mind has been changed for me.
When given the tar plower, McQueen goes way too fast and ends up just making one massive bumpy road. This isn't going to cut it for the residents of Radiator Springs, and they demand that he dig back up the entire road and restart, going slower and doing a more thoughtful job. After arguing with them for a bit, Doc challenges him to a race.
Then why don't we just have a little race? Me and you.
What?
me and you.
One lap around, and if he can make it, then he gets out of doing the work.
Speed, I'm speed. Float like a Cadillac, sting like a Beamer.
Of course, McQueen is unable to do so, as he's never learned to drive on dirt. He ends up falling into the ditch and making a fool out of himself in front of the whole town.
Hey! Was that floating like a Cadillac? Or was that stinging like a Beamer? I'm confused.
Frustrated, McQueen stays up all night and fixes the road for them. Whenever Doc wakes up to see the job well done, he questions whether or not McQueen left, only for Sheriff to let him know that instead of trying to flee like he has in the past, he's actually stuck at the dirt track attempting to make the difficult turn. Amused, Doc watches on. Later on, Mater and McQueen have their first ever bonding time, tractor tipping. McQueen's loud engine wakes up more than just a few tractors, and the guys are run off by Frank the Combine Harvester. You know, I kind of remember this scene actually freaking me out a little bit when I was little. Anyway, at the end of their adventurous night, Mater tells McQueen that they're best friends.
My best friend.
Which theoretically would have weirded him out, as they haven't really known each other for very long. But instead of shunning Mater for his feelings, McQueen looks on fondly, finally having somebody to call his friend. The next morning, McQueen is told to wait in Doc's shop for more gas, and he finds not one, not two, but several old piston cups laying around being used as scrap holders. Distraught, McQueen confronts Doc about his past, but he shuts it down almost completely. He goes to talk to the other residents of Radiator Springs about it, but none of them know anything about Doc being a racer. Sally announces that she plans on taking McQueen on a drive, and the two head out on a romantic date together. She explains the history of their small town and how it used to be a booming community before the larger highways were built. Nobody needed to go through their town anymore, as there is now a much more efficient way to travel, leaving them to be left in the dust and forgotten. Once the two lovebirds return, they're thrown into a loop by a bunch of the tractors running through town. McQueen offers to round them up, only to happen upon Doc racing by himself on the old dirt track. He confronts him again about racing, but Doc shuts him down, telling him that he only cares about himself, that he doesn't trust him. He tells McQueen of his crash and how instead of trusting in him and allowing him to continue to race, they shut him out and moved on to the next rookies that were standing in line behind him. Later, after finally getting through the residents about how important his big race is and how much it means to him, they all decide to fix him up and get him looking snazzy before leaving. Mac eventually finds him and tells him to hurry and travel with him to the race, but McQueen has other plans. He takes his time saying goodbye to everybody that he cares about in Radiator Springs. This simple, kind gesture ends up paying off for McQueen, because he did well enough for Doc to travel with all of their friends to the race, making a makeshift pit crew in the process. Using Doc's advice throughout the race, he's about to come in first. That is, until the King gets severely injured in an accident. The same accident that Doc suffered. McQueen, remembering Doc's situation and feeling empathy for his opponent, decides to break and wheel the King across the finish line instead of taking the win. Chuck, on the other hand, blindly gets first place, but nobody really cares, since he didn't also choose to help and ends up getting perceived by the general public as a huge jerk. Because McQueen sacrificed the win to help one of their racers out, Dynaco offers McQueen a spot on their team and a sponsorship. But for once, McQueen decides to stick with the underdogs and proudly stands by Rusty's, the people who've been there for him since day one. The first movie ends with McQueen hyping up Radiator Springs and making even more relationships with the residents, such as getting a little bit closer with Miss Sally.
Queen and Sally.
Before launching Cars 2, we get a taste test of all that Mater is capable of, brought to you by Mater himself, coming up with different stories and going on elaborate adventures in the depths of his mind. Some of these tales include Tokyo Mater, where Mater travels to Tokyo to compete in an elaborate race, souped up in a neon baby blue and impressively fast compared to what he's used to. Or Time Travel Mater, where Mater gains the ability to time travel, going all the way back to the 1990s and meeting the Stanley. He's the founder of Radiator Springs, and also the statue that McQueen accidentally vandalized and used to rub up the main road leading into the small town in the first movie. Many more of Mater's tales were told and televised. Our second movie begins with a top-secret message from what appears to be a spy finding out some information. Before we can figure out what he's going to say, though, he gets cut off and presumably taken care of by whoever was spying on him.
And be careful, it's not safe out here. Transmitting my grids now. Good luck.
The movie then cuts to Finn McMissile, a British secret agent, traveling to the spy's location, an oil rig in the ocean. He's trying to either find out what he did, or find his body, or both. Unfortunately, while spying, Finn finds his comrade's body power-pressed into a tight box. Not like inside a box. He was turned into a box. Jeez. Gasping too loudly at the sight of his friend's box body, Finn reveals his location, and is then chased around the oil rig until he makes a dashing escape. We are then taken back to Radiator Springs, packed with our original crew. Apparently, after his win from the last movie, McQueen has been away for a while, winning Piston Cup after Piston Cup. Because of this, Mater is super excited to see him again, as they apparently need to make up for a whole summer's worth of best friend activities. McQueen agrees with Mater's requests, but is clearly a bit uncomfortable with the way that they used to hang out, finding it a bit dirty and unfun. He ends up telling Mater that he would like to have a nice dinner with Sally and have some peace and quiet after coming back. Although this does upset Mater, he agrees.
Shep, Mater, I meant it would be just me and Sally.
Oh.
only to show up at the restaurant and pretend to be their waiter. At the restaurant, the TV depicts a news report where Sir Miles is introduced showcasing his new product, a synthetic gasoline called All in All, which is apparently much better for the environment. He's choosing to introduce his new product at the World Grand Prix. All of the race cars will have to use the product as a sort of promotion. During the news interview, they end up conversing with Francesco Bernoulli, who we will soon find to be one of McQueen's rivals. He talks badly about McQueen, which upsets Mater, causing him to call into the news channel and challenging Francesco on McQueen's behalf. After McQueen takes over and talks to Francesco on live, he's encouraged to come compete in the World Grand Prix.
You know what? They just got back. Deal me in, baby. Ka-chow! Yeah!
After accepting, McQueen is encouraged by Sally to bring Mater since he never brings along his bestie to any of his races. He reluctantly agrees, but is overwhelmed when he finds out that the first race is in Tokyo, Japan. Super fun for Mater, however, hard for McQueen to keep an eye on him in such a large, exciting place. Lots of bright lights and pretty colors, you know? At the ceremonial meeting before the race, Finn enters, looking for Tokyo's spy team. He spots Holly, a purple car who reveals herself to be there on a business mission, just like him. She explains that the cars they were trying to investigate were secretly hogging the largest oil conversation reserve in the world. She tells Finn that the American spy that was also sent there has more information, that he will signal him whenever they're ready to disclose. Eventually, they get the signal, which reveals his location that just so happens to be in the bathroom. Right after sending the signal, he's bombarded and jumped by the bad guys. Whenever Finn and Holly go in to find his beacon, they run into Mater and assume that he's the American spy, even though this couldn't be further from the truth. Holly gives Mater instructions for a location to meet, which Mater gladly complies with due to him thinking that Holly wants to date him and is convinced that she just planned a date. Jeez, poor Mater never knows what's going on. You know, at least he's having a good time. Meanwhile, the real American car is shown being interrogated by the bad guys who explain that the special new oil, All in All, is actually really dangerous when it's hit with an electromagnetic pulse. It can cause some serious damage or even death. They show this by using it on the American spy and literally kill him. Okay, it's like the third time that they've murdered cars in this movie. Is this for kids? The movie then cuts to the first race of the Grand Prix. McQueen and Francesco are neck and neck pretty much the whole time. Well, except for the dirt section, of course, when Francesco satisfyingly gets absolutely left in the dust. Towards the end of the race, the bad guys are seen shooting different cars with their electromagnetic laser, just like they did the American, but less intense, just causing them to crash out and be eliminated from the race. Because so many professional racers are crashing, it's presumed by the majority of everybody watching that they're having difficulties only because they're using the All in All oil. While the bad guys are shooting the different cars, they notice Mater, who they had figured out was the person who had been given the American spy's information. All of their minions begin closing in on Mater, who's only saved due to Holly and Finn's intervention. Meanwhile, Mater never turned his communication device off during McQueen's race and ended up messing him up by saying a bunch of random things in his ear while he's trying to focus.
McQueen suddenly moves to the outside.
That's it, and I did it.
I cannot believe what I just saw, Brent. That was
McQueen lost to Francesco because of this, and ends up yelling at Mater, basically cutting off Mater because of it. He doesn't listen to Mater when he tries to explain himself, thinking that he's just being dumb like he normally is, due to it sounding really far-fetched. Mater ends up trying to leave Tokyo because of their fight, but is taken into the spy plane with Finn. Still oblivious to Mater's true identity,
Hey, doggone it, look, it's my imaginary girlfriend.
Come on, get in here.
they ask him a bunch of questions about car engine parts, where Mater explains exactly what they're needing to know since he's been a mechanic his whole life. Hold on. Mater's a mechanic. He works on cars. The cars are pretty much people. Is Mater a doctor? Anyway, using Mater, they find their informant who sold the rare parts to the engine that they were trying to find. They end up figuring out that the people behind what's going on are all trashy cars, also known as lemons. It's the word used for a car that breaks down all the time. They give Mater a disguise in order to get even closer to the lemons, hoping to find out their true motive for the attacks. McQueen and the crew head to the second race, which occurs in Italy. Little do they know that Mater is also in town doing God's work with Finn and Holly. Mater sneaks into a secret meeting where they find that the lemons are attacking the race cars in order to get back at fancy cars for always making fun of them and putting them down for being, objectively, bad cars. They're specifically targeting the All in All, so that all the rich cars will want to use regular oil again. But when they go back to get oil, they will find that the lemons own all of this oil, referencing the huge oil rig reserve in the ocean from the beginning of the movie. Because of all the crashes regarding the All in All oil, the Grand Prix committee has decided not to require the All in All oil like they were going to do for the races before. However, McQueen reveals during a press conference that he's still going to be using it, since he's become good friends with the creator of it and he wants to stick by his friends, since, you know, he's been feeling bad about what he said to Mater. Due to McQueen's defiance of the Lemons' plans, they decide to make an example out of him, and proclaim that instead of just making him crash, they're going to kill him, live for the world to see and never use all-in-one oil again. Mater, still being present for this conversation, yells no in response to his friend being targeted. In doing so, he just completely reveals himself, taking off his disguise. Mater makes a daring escape, not on purpose, just equipped with a lot of different gadgets that listen to him as he talks out loud to himself. He attempts to race over to tell McQueen that he's in grave danger, but he's stopped at security multiple times. It's only until McQueen hears him yelling that he realizes that he's being called for. The Lemons end up getting to Mater first, and he's unable to tell McQueen about the plan set to harm him. Not only is Mater captured, but Finn and Holly as well. While tied up and fearing for their lives, Mater finally reveals to them the truth about him, not being a spy. They're finally in a position to actually hear him out. McQueen calls Radiator Springs in order to talk to Mater, only to find that he isn't there, and that he never was. Worried, McQueen almost doesn't race, but he ends up continuing due to Sally encouraging him and telling him that if Mater were there, he would want him to do it. If only they knew how far this was from the truth. For some reason, during the race, their laser cuts out.
What happened? I don't know, Professor.
To which they reveal to Mater that as a backup plan, they placed a bomb in his pit, which will kill him just as easily as the laser. Not as flashy, but I guess it works. There is so much murder in this movie. Mater eventually escapes and races to save his friends. Meanwhile, Finn and Holly make their own escape and race to catch up to Mater in order to help him. Mater makes it to their pit, quickly informing them of the bomb, only to learn from Finn and Holly that Mater's radiator was replaced with an exact replica, only it's a bomb. Mater races away, only to be chased by McQueen, who has no idea what's actually going on. Thankfully, though, Mater uses his gadgets to super speed away from McQueen, causing him to be too far out of range for the bomb activator to be able to go off. Eventually, Finn and Holly catch up to Mater, and they find out that the bomb is voice deactivated. The only problem is they don't know who originally activated it. McQueen, Mater, and the spies, along with all their friends from Radiator Springs, team up in order to fight off the bad guys, long enough to try and figure out how to get the bomb off. None of their bolts work, which is when Mater finally figures it out. He finds the man behind everything, who just so happens to be the man who created the race in the first place. Sir Miles Axelrod. Dun dun dun. He exposes Axelrod for creating one massive ruse in order for his True Oil company to pop off, putting all the cars in danger on purpose and pretending like he's the victim. This is all revealed as true whenever he turns off Mater's bomb right before it goes off, saving his own skin but exposing himself as well. After all this is found out, Mater gets professionally congratulated by the Queen and sent off on his way to Radiator Springs. The movie ends happily with reunions and warm vibes from everybody, even Holly confirming to everyone in Mater's hometown that she is in fact dating him officially. Sometimes it seems like being oblivious pays off in the long run. The third movie starts off with McQueen and his iconic speech, "I eat losers for breakfast." Except this time he kind of seems to be doubting himself, saying things like, "Is that really what I used to say?"
One winner, 42 losers. I eat losers for breakfast.
A montage of him racing and winning proceeds, that is, until Jackson Storm shows him up. One of the rookies is in town, and he easily smoked the old fellas out of their game. The movie then cuts to Chick Hicks, who is now a news reporter, probably because he could never beat McQueen. On his news channel, an analyst explains how the rookies these days actually have a bunch of different types of new tech. They've never seen this before, and it gives them a huge edge. With many new rookies being introduced, McQueen doesn't really stand a chance. He quite literally isn't equipped with the same driving tech in order to do so. Because of the new competition, Cal, Dynaco's driver, decides to retire. Not only that, but a lot of McQueen's competitors that he's driven with for years decide to retire as well, too defeated by the new tech being introduced. McQueen stays for much longer than all of them, determined to show the world that he still got it. Unfortunately, he's no match, and ends up pushing himself too hard, skipping all the required steps during his last pit stop and putting himself in grave danger. Mimicking Doc's career-ending crash, he's taken out of the race completely. Back in Radiator Springs, McQueen decides that he has to try something new in order to continue. He doesn't want to be Doc, having people tell him that he's done and can't race anymore. He decides to begin training like how the new kids on the block do. He wants to become faster than them and learn their ways. He reaches out to his sponsors, Rusty's, for any help, only to find that they've actually sold their entire company in order for McQueen to train properly. McQueen is shocked, but quickly heads to the new facility in order to begin his training. At the facility, McQueen meets his new sponsor that was responsible for paying for everything, and Cruz Ramirez, the trainer of the facility, who kindly claims him as her senior project. After assessing what he's capable of, his new sponsor brings the bad news. He's not fast enough. Every time he loses, he damages the brand he's made for himself, and his sponsor's inches away from dropping him because of it. McQueen compromises with him, promises that if he doesn't win his next race, he'll retire, but that he wants at least one more chance before he actually has to kick the bucket. And if he does manage to win, he will be in charge of deciding when he's done, not his sponsor or anybody else. Reluctantly, the sponsor agrees, agrees, leaving McQueen to train his hardest, with Cruz in the meantime. McQueen meets Cruz at the beach so that he can feel some real sand in his tires. But instead of being coached by her, it seems like McQueen's the only one doing the coaching, as Cruz has never raced outside in the elements before. The entire day is spent trying to teach Cruz how to race on sand, ending only when she's able to keep up with him to accurately calculate his speed. Next, the two make their way over to the dirt track that McQueen assumes is used for regular racing, only to find out that when they get there, it's some sort of demolition derby. Although scared, he and Cruz manage to escape inches from death, with McQueen teaching Cruz how to drive on dirt. Though they're happy to be alive, and even somehow winning the strange derby, McQueen's identity is revealed, which looks incredibly bad to the press. He takes his anger out on Cruz, yelling at her for not being able to train him to be any faster than he already is. Cruz, upset, separates herself from the situation, and we learn of her story. She tells McQueen that she never intended to be a trainer. She wanted her whole life to be a racer. But the one and only time she ever made it to a race, she got too nervous and felt as though she didn't belong. Instead of taking her chance, she left and decided to dream small or not at all. She informs him that while she may seem like nothing to him, she grew up watching him and looking up to him, thinking he was the coolest racer on the track and wanting nothing more than to be like him. Yeah, but you feel like a real jerk now, McQueen. After a late night chat with Mater, McQueen realizes that the one and only person that could help him is Doc. But because he's not there, he decides to find Doc's own trainer in order to learn from the best. McQueen apologizes to Cruz and invites her to go with him, regardless of if she still wants to be a trainer or not. She agrees, happy that their friendship isn't completely over. The two reach the legendary Smokey and learn more of Doc's past, how stubborn he was, and exactly how good of a racer he was behind the scenes. Hearing of Doc's achievements from people that he was actually close with brings McQueen much closer to him overall, and knowing that people he was close with are still alive and kicking, smiling and remembering all that they went through with him brings him joy. After a fun night at the local bar, McQueen talks to Smokey alone, asking for his help. Smokey agrees, training him along with Cruz to be the best racers that they can possibly be. Eventually, they make it to McQueen's final race. About halfway through the race, McQueen's sponsor starts getting frustrated with Cruz hanging around McQueen so much. He instructs her to get back to the facility so she can continue to do her job and train more potential recruits. McQueen can hear the entire encounter, and it's in that moment that he realizes what he must do. He goes in for his last pit before the second half of the race begins and instructs Cruz to go into the race for him. She's surprised and confused, but after a motivational speech from McQueen, she abides and goes into the race. Once in it, she quickly surpasses almost everybody, landing herself in fourth place. Whenever Storm hears of this, he decides to fall back to her place and mutter discouraging things to her, reminding her of where she came from and claiming that she doesn't actually deserve to be there in the first place. While this initially upsets her, McQueen quickly cheers her back up, explaining to her that the only reason Storm would have done it is if she was getting into his head, and he was the one who was actually getting nervous in regards to the race. Cruz races back up and goes even further than she was before, this time making it all the way to second. When she goes to make her final leap to first place on her last lap, Storm gets angry and slams her into the wall. Instead of letting this defeat her, Cruz decides to use one of Doc's epic moves from his glory days and maneuvers herself onto the wall and leaps above Storm, completely flipping over him and landing herself in first place just in time to win the race. When she's off the track, the Rusty sponsor tries to play nice as if he didn't discourage her dreams and demands that she continue her old boring thing that she'd been doing. He even asks her to race for him, which she proudly declines, quitting her training job in the process. Good old Dynaco hires her on instead and buys Rusty's in the process after seeing how badly McQueen's new sponsor has been treating him, gracefully saving them both. The last movie ends with Cruz getting some new Dynaco paint and supporting Doc's old number, 51. Not only that, but McQueen comes out with his own look as well, mimicking Doc's dark blue paint and adding fabulous to the front of his name in order to commemorate Doc for all that he's done for him. It's revealed that McQueen will be Cruz's new coach and instructor during the races as the two of them race off into the sunset together. In this exclusive Disney Plus miniseries, we follow McQueen and Mater on their own side quest adventure. The first episode begins with Mater informing McQueen of his invitation to his sister's wedding. Normally, this would be an incredible occasion and will be treated as such, but Mater explains to McQueen that he's not exactly close with his sister, and there's good reason as to why he's never mentioned her before. Seeing his friend look dreadful for not only the wedding but also traveling alone, McQueen announces that he's going to travel with him in order to keep him company on his long journey. Mater is so happy to spend time with his best bud and hoping that his long-awaited reunion with his sister will go more smoothly with his best friend by his side. The two head off on their journey and make their first stop at the Dino Park, where Mater learns too much information and claims that his head feels too fuzzy. The episode ends with Mater fleeing from the museum after thinking he's going to be eaten by the fake dinosaur statues. Oh, Mater. Next up on the cars list is the Great Salt Plains, where they almost get demolished by land speed racers, a type of racing that tests the bounds of modern land speed. Their primary goal is to go as fast as physically possible, aiming to beat records and test the laws of speed itself. McQueen and Mater meet some of the racers, which raises concern for McQueen as the cars they see are basically falling apart at the seams due to crashes crashes involving their dangerous endeavor. The sight of potential danger doesn't stop Mater though, and he jumps at the first opportunity to be turned into a speed racer in order to finally feel what it's like to be a fast car. Against McQueen's wishes, Mater is set off, and boy does he end up going really fast. So fast he ends up crashing and meeting the Speed Demon, which appears to be just like an angel who takes crashed cars up to their afterlife. Mater refuses her though, demanding that he be put back into his body so as not to leave McQueen behind. She initially refuses, but since he's so stubborn and he literally broke into his own body and immersed his soul back into physical being, she allows him to slip through death's clutches and miraculously not die. What a surprisingly dark episode. McQueen and Mater find themselves in a sticky situation yet again whenever Mater decides to make friends with the local Bigfoot hunters. He gets him and McQueen wrapped up in a Bigfoot search party against McQueen's wishes, and coincidentally, the Bigfoot they were looking for only happens to find McQueen, tying him up in their cabin. Whenever he becomes aware of what's going on, he realizes that it's not Bigfoot that's gotten him, but rather a regular monster truck. The only thing strange about her is her appearance, ridden with moss and foliage. She tells McQueen that she ran off to the mountain in order to escape from her fate of destroying cars at the monster truck performances. And while she may miss performing in front of a crowd, hurting innocent cars was too mentally intense for her. Eventually, Mater shows up, and together the three of them put on an elaborate ruse to get the Bigfoot hunters off of her back in order for her to enjoy her peaceful time in the woods by herself. Except, once the job has been completed, Ivy feels lonely and asks the boys if she can tag along in their adventures, to which they happily agree. Starting right where we left off, Ivy is now traveling with McQueen and Mater. Before they continue though, they take her to a car wash, where for the first time we get to see Ivy in all of her monster truck glory. The crew continue to make their way to the wedding when they eventually get stopped by a circus. McQueen begs them not to make him go in, but Mater and Ivy are insistent on witnessing the magical art of circus performance. During the show, one of them is asked to perform with them, and Ivy happily volunteers. At first, McQueen and Mater are worried that Ivy might revert back to her monster trucking ways, which she swore not to go back to. You know, smashing cars and things of that matter. Thankfully though, she surprises them all and puts on a glorious dancing performance instead. After the show, McQueen and Mater congratulate her on a performance well done, and she proclaims that she plans on staying with the circus instead of continuing on the journey with the two boys. After some mild objections from McQueen, they eventually allow her to stay, only because they know just how much it means to her to perform again. The episode ends with the boys continuing on in their next adventure. So, as you all know by now, Mater has been dreading visiting his sister, which has been the point of the entire journey. McQueen is assuming that Mater's sister must resemble him, but is shocked to find that she's from a glorious regal mansion. The two arrive at the wedding venue and are greeted by butlers and other socialites around the town. They also bump into Cruz from the third Cars movie. She tells the two that she's there because her brother is getting married, finding out that soon her and Mater will technically be siblings. Eventually, we're introduced to Motto, and we find out just why Mater was worried about the reunion. The two can't stop bickering. Eventually though, they make up and the wedding is a success. Although McQueen has been complaining about the trip basically the whole time, and it's been a complete mess filled with chaos, he realizes how important the bonding time has been with Mater, and ends up deciding to take a long road trip back with him anyway, ending the series on a happy note and potential for even more shorts in the future. And with that, we leave the Cars franchise in the rear view mirror. Thank you all for watching this episode. Be sure to leave a like if you want to see more episodes like this, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on any good videos in the future. See ya!